This video is sponsored by MyHeritage, the #1 platform for discovering your family history and building your family tree. Use my link in the description to receive a free 14-day trial. You are one of the earliest humans to walk the planet. You live in a small group of around a few dozen others with whom you have a strong bond and relationship. You have some relations with other nearby bands of humans as well, whom you either work together with or fight against. You primarily rely on foraging for plants and hunting for animals. Your main concerns and wants are food, water, survival, and leisure. Threats are simple but pervasive. There are no laws, no governments, no economic systems, no organized religions, and no civilization at all. Are you happy? Are you happier and better off than you would be right now in the modern world? Is life more satisfying or less satisfying? Is it more peaceful or less peaceful? More or less moral? We have many good reasons to believe that in the pre-civilized world, you would not necessarily have been more moral or less subject to violence and threats than you are today. More than likely, the opposite. You would have had a more frequent and direct experience of localized problems and violence. However, we also have good reasons to believe that your life would have been far simpler than today, with fewer concerns and wants. All in all, arguably, it isn't totally obvious whether you would be more or less happy in such a time, or perhaps put better, more or less satisfied, existing in a state preferable to what the average person might be experiencing today in the modern world. Regardless of any absolute truth in terms of the quality of experience on either side of this dichotomy of history, this thought experiment points us toward important, fundamental philosophical questions about the nature of humanity, progress, morality, and politics. Is humanity inherently good or bad? Or perhaps neither? Are complexity, technology, and novelty primarily good things in terms of the quality of human experience, or do they largely take us from a more intuitive, pleasant, and simple experience of life? Do progress and civilization purify our morals with systems of cooperation, or do they deceive us with superficial improvements, while the suffering and malice of humankind persists underneath it all, merely transfigured, or perhaps even exacerbated in new forms? It can be easy to romanticize the past, both our own and humanity's in general. There is certainly no shortage of things to loathe in the modern world. Wars and weapons of mass destruction, hateful ideologies carried out at scale, stark inequalities amongst resources and wealth, exceedingly impossible to meet social expectations, technologies that perforate every aspect of our lives, often causing or augmenting things like isolation, paranoia, or hysteria. But perhaps few people have romanticized humanity's past more than the 18th century philosopher and writer who partly inspired the very movement of Romanticism, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. When referring to that opening image of early human existence, Rousseau wrote, "If we consider him, in a word, just as he must have come from the hands of nature, we behold in him an animal weaker than some and less agile than others, but, taking him all round, the most advantageously organized of any. I see him satisfying his hunger at the first oak and slaking his thirst at the first brook, finding his bed at the foot of the tree which afforded him a repast, and, with that, all his wants supplied." For Rousseau, life was unequivocally better in that time of history prior to civilization. For him, civilization was not an elixir, but a poison. Rousseau was born in Geneva, Switzerland in 1712. His mother died 9 days after giving birth to him as a result of birthing complications. Then, his father essentially gave him up at age 10 after he needed to flee the state to avoid criminal charges. Rousseau would subsequently live a relatively turbulent, isolated life throughout his childhood and young adult years, coming under the care of his uncle, then a pastor, then a watch engraver, and then finally a noblewoman, who would eventually and briefly become his lover. In 1740, Rousseau moved to France to pursue music theory. This move would be crucial in exposing him to notable figures and ideas associated with the French Enlightenment movement, which would surely influence and redirect his life's path. During this time, 18th century Europe was in the midst of the Age of Enlightenment. Societies were becoming increasingly wealthy, innovative, technological, commercialized, and interconnected. It was the general view that all of this was a good thing, that all progress and development was a good thing. Society was moving away from ignorance and toward civility and prosperity. Rousseau, however, was not so sure. In 1750, while reading the French newspaper Mercure de France, he came across an advertisement for an essay contest with a prompt that read, "Has the restoration of the sciences and arts contributed to the purification of morals?" In other words, was humanity getting better in the modern era? Rousseau was immediately and deeply affected by this question. He later wrote, "Within an instant of reading this, I saw another universe and became another man." He would subsequently write and enter an essay into the contest, which he would go on to win with. This would ultimately set Rousseau on a philosophical path that would define the rest of his career, life, and legacy, and significantly influence the course of history in general. Rousseau's essay would be titled Discourse on the Arts and Sciences. In this essay, along with his subsequent works, most notably Discourse on Inequality, Rousseau's primary argument was the following: no, the restoration of the sciences and arts were not contributing to the purification of morals. Rather, humans were better off before the introduction of civilization, including the arts and sciences, and civilization had essentially corrupted humanity. Rousseau, along with his philosophical counterparts of the time, referred to the original, unadulterated, pre-social and pre-political conditions of humanity as the state of nature. And for Rousseau, this was the ideal. In it, life comprised far greater simplicity, self-understanding, connection with others and nature, a purer and more intuitive morality, and an overall more satisfying experience of life. Importantly, Rousseau believed all this on the basis of his conviction that humans are inherently good, with an inclination toward kindness and cooperation. For Rousseau, the introduction and development of civilization deprived humanity of these noble inclinations and qualities. It led to what he referred to as amour-propre, which translates into self-love. This self-love, however, refers to a sort of pride, greed, and vanity. He contrasts it against what he referred to as amour de soi, which permeated pre-society and is a more holistic, integrated, and natural self-love inclined toward survival and well-being without any expense to other people. Rousseau wrote, "Man is naturally good, and that it is from these social institutions alone that men become wicked." Since civilization introduces things like class differences, power differences, differences in material and property ownership, and so on, members of a society become compelled to constantly compare themselves against others, to strive toward others and social ideals of success and perfection. There becomes a need to look and be a certain way, and there becomes a sort of comparative identity in which individual self-perception and self-knowledge forms primarily out of the reflection against the mirror of the collective. Individuals inevitably become civilized by this, but they also become corrupted, compelled to endlessly improve, obtain, and dominate, regardless of consequences to others, the greater whole, or even themselves. The savage lives within himself. Social man, always outside himself. He knows how to live only in the opinion of others. It is, so to speak, from their judgment alone that he derives the sense of his own existence, Rousseau wrote. As a result, morality becomes increasingly eroded as the wants and needs required to satisfy one's reflection against the central mirror of society continually increase. Rousseau's other most prominent and influential work was The Social Contract, published in 1762, in which he takes his foundational assessments of human nature and the problems of society and formulates a social contract theory. Social contract theories are essentially theories about the appropriate balance between individual rights, freedoms, and obligations within a society, which are agreed upon amongst the people of a society and enforced typically by a designated sovereign power. Though the terms and context of such an agreement can vary, a society can only form and function with this kind of agreement in place. When it came to Rousseau's theory, he believed that the collective, all the individuals of a society, should be the sovereign power. In other words, instead of being governed by monarchs, societies should be governed by what he referred to as the general will, or the consensus preferences of the people as a whole. Since humans are fundamentally good in Rousseau's mind, his goal was essentially to provide the maximum state of freedom for humans. Freedom from authoritative constraints that impose unnatural restrictions on behavior and cooperation. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains, he wrote. For him, these chains needed to be broken, which he believed could be done when all individuals cooperated together in rationally establishing the most suitable conditions for everyone in society. Since each individual in a society would want what is best for each individual in said society, then each individual would set aside their immediate individual interests in order to determine the optimal conditions of the whole of which they are a part of. In doing so, they would nonetheless remain free because they are still achieving what is preferable and natural to them. The problem is to find a form of association which will defend and protect with the whole common force the person and goods of each associate, and in which each, while uniting himself with all, may still obey himself alone and remain as free as before, Rousseau wrote. Of course, there appear to be many problems with Rousseau's theories here, particularly for larger, increasingly complex and interconnected societies. Even if humans are inherently good, and, when let loose from the chains of a central authority, they're likely to want to cooperate according to a general will, how could this possibly function at scale? How could every member of a large, complex society possibly know and contribute to all the laws and structures of the society? Most individuals would not care to, not understand enough to, or both. And if a significant number of people did not participate, leaving a separate group of individuals who do care and are capable of knowing enough to formulate the general will, then the general will would no longer be very general. In all likelihood, such an approach would end up back with a society ruled by concentrated groups of individuals and elite classes, at best. And on a more fundamental level, returning to Rousseau's original claims about humanity in the state of nature, on what basis are we to confidently believe humans are inherently good and able to cooperate at large scales of organization? Rousseau assumes a lot of faith in a sort of ultimate benevolence of humanity. Can and will people really put their own immediate interests aside if they have the opportunity not to? The 17th century English philosopher Thomas Hobbes did not think so. Hobbes is an individual well known for starkly opposing Rousseau's views on these questions and theories of human nature and civilization. He believed a much bleaker image of the state of nature, which, for him, was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Without a governing authority, humans are destined to be in a war of all against all, leading to fear, mistrust, and violence. He believed all this on the basis of his conviction that humanity is inherently bad, and its nature can only be resolved in a social contract where individuals relinquish their freedom to a central sovereign authority, like an absolute monarch, that ensures the order and protection of its people. Humans are rational enough, in his view, to determine that this structure of civilization, helmed by a distinct power body, is most suitable at achieving order and protecting against the chaos and violence inherent to the world. With this, the sort of corruption that Rousseau accused civilization of causing, Hobbes puts at the very foundation of humanity, of which civilization is always up against, working to withstand and prevent from breaking out. Likewise here, however, one could likely find many valid critiques to Hobbes' theories as well. Moving somewhat away from both Hobbes and Rousseau, regardless of who you might tend to agree with more, the only thing that is truly clear about human nature as a universality is that not much is clear. There's so much uncertainty, so many nuances and questions that come into frame when considering that original state of nature and the qualities of civilization. If, like Rousseau, one believes that in the state of nature, humans were inherently good, but within the state, humanity possessed the inevitable abilities and desires to pull itself out from such a state and into complexity and corruption, then how could such a nature really be good? Saying a bomb is good simply because its lit fuse has not yet reached the end and exploded surely makes no sense. And inversely, if, like Hobbes, one believes that in the state of nature, humans were inherently bad, but within the state, humanity possessed the inevitable abilities and desires to defuse its own bomb and create order, then how could such a nature really be bad? In truth, neither Hobbes's, nor Rousseau's, nor anyone else's ideas should be considered or accepted with any universal accuracy. We simply cannot know if humans in a sort of vacuum of nature are good or bad. We cannot go back in time and ask the earliest humans how they felt about life, themselves, and others. And even if we could, humanity cannot be understood in a vacuum of space, conditions, or time. Human behavior is far too complex. Existence is far too complex. The reasons, methods, and structures of society are far too complex. However, what we can know, despite all this complexity and uncertainty, is what we have created, endured, and achieved. Look at what we have done. Look at how far we have come. The fact that all this exists at such a scale, society, order, ideas of morality, and reflections on nature, is a complete wonder. Our progress might not always be good, it might not always be bad, but it is certainly always profound. We have created superstructures upon superstructures, new worlds held up with the arms of hope, ingenuity, cooperation, hubris, and rationality. Of course, we have also destroyed many worlds too, knocking them down with the same arms. In all likelihood, humans are not inherently good and not inherently bad. We are inherently powerful. The only universalities are these: complexity and power. We are broods still learning our own strength. Perhaps one day we will grow up. Perhaps even with age, we will still carry the dichotomy of good and evil in our hearts. In the words of the Russian author Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart, and through all human hearts. This line shifts. Inside us, it oscillates with the years, and even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. And even in the best of all hearts, there remains an unuprooted, small corner of evil. Understanding who we are as individuals requires understanding where we came from. We are all historical beings, our existences inexorably sprouting from the branches of our unique family trees, planted in unique places of time and history. With this video sponsor, MyHeritage, you can experience profound moments of discovery and connection with your ancestry by easily exploring your family history, traveling back in time hundreds of years worth of generations, and feeling that deep interconnectedness you have with the past. Provide as little as a few names and dates related to your immediate family members, and MyHeritage begins to uncover and create branches of your family tree, scanning over 20 billion historical records. On each branch, MyHeritage can provide specific information, documents, and even photos of your ancestors. The more information MyHeritage has and discovers, the bigger your tree gets. Using their feature, Instant Discovery, you can continue to reveal more and more about your family's past that you would never otherwise know. Then, right on the platform, you can repair, colorize, and even animate the photos that you find or upload, bringing the past to life. One of the most interesting things for me is looking through all the available documents and photos related to my grandparents and great-grandparents. I was able to discover that my great-grandfather actually had registered copyrights for his music that was never officially published, which I never even knew about him. I was also able to find the exact dates my great-grandparents immigrated to the US and when they were naturalized in the early 1900s. I also love being able to find and easily enhance old photos on MyHeritage. I found and colorized this old high school yearbook photo of my grandfather, which made for some really nice moments when I shared it with my family members. Whether you want to bring the names and stories from old family photos to life, discover the vast branching of your past, or get closer to your origins, MyHeritage is a profound, illuminating experience unlike anything else. Join the rest of MyHeritage's 90 million users and sign up for a free 14-day trial by using my link in the description. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching in general, and see you next video.